Greetings, everyone, and thank you once again for stopping by the Infidel Guy Real Audio Show brought to you by freespeech.org. Well, this evening I have a special guest. His name is Dave Wisker, and we will be talking about a variety of pseudo-scientific claims and other fallacies that theists and New Agers posit in particular chat rooms. Dave Wisker has been involved in a variety of different moderation in chat rooms, including Omni Magazine, online, and Antimatter Chat. He goes by the name of Helix and many different variations of Helix. Welcome to the show, Dave Wisker.
Thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, what is going on here? What seems to be the problem? Everywhere we look now, thanks to the internet, we see time and time again these arguments posited for ghosts, for bases on Mars. We have aliens putting us here. We have psychic abilities. What is the problem here? What is going on? Why do people fall so easily for this stuff? And is there any credence to this stuff?
I don't know why there's so much of it. I think there's generally a lack of critical thinking in the general population. At least that's what I've found, the chats that I've hosted. But most of the time, underlying that is an inability to detect logical fallacies and an understanding of scientific methods. And that's usually the underlying common theme. And we find quite a few of those in the chats that I've hosted over the years.
Well, no, one common argument that I get a lot all the time is, well, prove to me that my so-and-so doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's probably the most common one I've ever come across. And I've never fully understood that because I've never understood how you could prove something doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, you'd never know it. And so how could you prove that? What evidence could you show to show that something doesn't exist? So it's amazing how common that really is. If you take, for example, God, someone says, well, prove that God doesn't exist. Well, even if he didn't exist, there could be a rock under the universe somewhere we haven't turned over yet to find it. So it's just very, very strange to me that people would use that kind of argument over and over and over again, when really what they should be saying is the converse. That is, they're making the claim, they should be making the case for their argument. That is, providing positive evidence that what they're claiming does exist. Because that's the only way you're going to find out.
So really, anyone can make up a claim then and then put that responsibility on someone else. That's really what they're doing. So I can believe in invisible elves if I want to.
Sure. It could be fairies at the bottom of my garden, and I can say that, and they can say, well, prove it to me. And I said, well, you prove they don't exist, and it's just a way of just shifting the responsibility for making a claim. And it's a pretty lame argument, but it's probably the most common one that I've noticed over the years.
Well, probability versus possibility. I mean, I hear all the time that anything is possible. I mean, so why can't their theories about whatever they talk about be just as valid as any other reality?
Well, I guess it goes back to the same concept of providing positive evidence for the kind of theory that you've got. I'll give you an example. People that come on to the chat rooms, I want to talk about quantum mysticism, which is very common in the New Age groups. And they think that if they tie something in with quantum theory, because quantum theory is so statistically vague in certain areas, they feel they can use that to prove their theory. And then they say, well, anything's possible because quantum theory says so, and therefore it's got to be equally valid. Well, and yet they never ever come up with an experiment or a reasonable piece of positive evidence to show that that's true. And when I ask them that, they usually, I'll ask them in a nice way, usually. I try to be fairly neutral in the chat room. But they never really have any. All they can say is, well, it's possible, therefore it has to be valid. And there's another one I could never understand.
It appears that they don't understand the difference between what theories are. What a theory is, I've heard people say that, well, I think in layman's terms, the layman will utilize the word theory synonymously with hypothesis, right? But
right.
But But they don't understand that we talk about scientific theory. You're talking about years of research, testable, verifiable facts. These are things that they've done over and over again, right?
Well, yeah, scientific theory really is an explanation of observed facts. And therefore, it's not just a hunch. It's not something that's pulled out of their closet and just throw up for consideration. It's definitely something much more than that. And yet people say, oh, it's only a theory, when really what they're saying is they're confusing theory with hypothesis, like you said. And I hear that all the time. They really don't understand what a theory is. And evolution, for example, is probably one of the most verified theories in science, and yet you'll hear creationists throw out that, oh, it's just a theory, as if it's some kind of, just a joke, and it's not. And that's another very, very common theme that people use, especially in the New Age rooms. I got very jaded after a while listening to that, but yeah, they keep coming back with the same thing every time.
That's interesting. I know Massimo Pigliucci, I had him on the show not so long ago, and I don't know if you know of him. He's an evolutionary.
Oh, yes, right.
Okay, yeah, evolutionary biologist, and he was on the show. He talked about that same thing, that they really don't understand the concepts behind it. He gives them benefit of the doubt and thinks, well, maybe they just don't understand. But there are some out there who really just twist the facts, and they love to make it look like their faith or their hypothesis is just as good as any other scientific theory.
That's very true. They oftentimes they will tend to theorize before they have any data, and that's another problem. You know, you have to have some data before you come up with a theory. You can't just come up with a theory and then say, well, I'll go find some facts to fit it. You know what I mean? And I think Sherlock Holmes said that was a capital mistake to do that, and he's right. And I think most evolutionary biologists, when they're debating creationists, find that all the time.
Yeah, like Kent Hovind's banana argument.
Yeah, and also in the New Age group, New Age theories are rampant with that kind of thing. I'll give you an example. Well, reincarnation, for example, is a good one. You know, a lot of people in New Age rooms believe in reincarnation and will insist that it's a valid theory, but yet you'll say, well, what evidence is there for this? I mean, what observable facts can you come up with to say this? And they really don't. They basically end up with just anecdotes, stories that somebody told, that they basically accept as fact because it meets their own belief system.
I hear that a lot with some cases in India, I believe, where a few families that say that their husband or loved one or brother is reincarnated, and they utilize those arguments a lot. They say, well, there's a story in India.
Yeah, there's a scientist, I think he's a psychologist. His name is Ian Stevenson, I think. And he's written a book about reincarnation. Many years ago, he traveled to India and studied a lot of these stories that to try and find, some more than anecdotal evidence for reincarnation. And for the most part, he found the overwhelming majority of the stories were either outright falsities or were easily explained by the person knowing something that they didn't think they should have known. Speaking a language or knowing a person's description, they heard about it through another means. And only a very, very tiny fraction of the ones that he studied remained unexplained. But the fact that they remain unexplained does not validate that they're true. And yet, these, in the New Age rooms, you'll find people just insisting that just because they're unexplained means they have to be true, and that's not true at all.
I noticed that individuals tend to gravitate more towards fantasy, and that just because, once again, yes, just because there are no answers, for some reason, many of us like to gravitate to fantasy because fantasy is great. But I don't understand why they can't realize that there are many, many different, almost infinite other ideas and hypotheses to these conundrums that come up all the time.
Well, you find that with creationists often. Their argument is, well, if I can tear down evolution, then creationism has to be the only other alternative. And that's not true at all either. I was reading a book, maybe I can plug someone's book here on your show. There's a philosopher of science by the name of Robert Tennant, and I think he's at University of Michigan now. But he published a book called Tower of Babel, which is evidence against a new creationism. And in there he talks about this idea that creationists will say, well, if evolution isn't true, then creationism has to be true. But he throws in another third alternative from a UFO group called the Rayavians.
Oh my goodness!
And it just comes out of nowhere, and he throws that out and says, well, what about them? You really can't say that you take the high road by default if you tear down the other guy. And so
sounds like Pascal's wager almost.
Right.
Well, many, and I hear this a lot, and I'm not even a scientist, and yet I feel personally insulted, but many individuals say that mainstream scientists are just closed-minded to the many other infinite possibilities out there. They always say that, well, there's just some things out there we just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Zechariah Sitchin, for one, I read some of his stuff, and he has some fantastical stuff about the Anunnaki and what they've done, and and how they've created human beings as slaves and all these things, but where is the evidence?
Well, in chat rooms, I've found, for the most part, when a person uses the term open-minded, they really mean you agree with them. Mm-hmm. That's not what and a closed-minded person is someone that just disagrees with them, and they'll throw stuff out like the Sitchin's works. Eric von Daniken is an older version of Sitchin that's just as bad as far as I'm concerned. Sitchin is a good example of someone who has kind of like a quasi credibility with the New Agers and ancient astronaut meetings and those kind of people, because he is one of the few people in the world that is able to read cuneiform, which is a Sumerian pictograph. And but people forget that just because you can read something doesn't mean you comprehend it very well.
Oh, that is true.
And Sitchin's interpretations of a lot of the Sumerian cuneiform writings have been found to be questionable at the very least. Questionable at best. And so I tend to take a lot of his stuff with a grain of salt. He has a hard time translating even sources that he uses for Egyptian translations. And he's been caught a few times with that. And not just that, but his concept of orbital mechanics and this 12th planet concept of Marduk, this big planet that supposedly comes around every 3,600 years. Basically, I was talking to someone who was a physicist that said the guy's out to lunch from day one in terms of that. So, but you see, that's the kind of stuff that's fairly exotic, and people in chat rooms will come in and they don't know that stuff. But they read Sitchin and they say, oh, wow, he can read cuneiform. He's got to be an authority. And they buy his line, hook, line, and sinker. And unfortunately, they haven't been taught in school the kind of science that they need to understand to determine whether the guy's a charlatan or whether he's speaking the truth. Von Daniken's a good example of that. He's made money off of people being ignorant. And what can I say? I wish I had his money, but I don't know how people can swallow that stuff without taking it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, speaking of which, someone emailed me actually the other day and said there's evidence that the Tower of Babel actually existed because there's an inscription at the bottom of the tower that reads place of tongues or the house of tongues or something of that nature.
Is that right?
Yeah, this is what he's saying. I haven't found anything.
I don't think so, but I'm not an archaeologist expert.
But even if it were true, once again, even if that encryption did read that doesn't mean it's true. That it coincides with the biblical story. And
it could be just someone taking that biblical story and then just carving it on a tomb or a building.
And the funny part is the same individual asked him, I said, okay, so if you found a place in Rome that said Apollo once sat here,
right,
would you really believe that?
Exactly. Well, it's funny because it's a simple question like that can just blow them away. They go, whoa, I never thought of that. You think, how could you not?
And there are places all over the world in which the people claim that their gods have sat here or ate here. Or
who's to say that Zeus wasn't any less real than Jehovah?
Well, truth. You mentioned truth earlier. How do we know what is the truth? Many believers of their whatever pseudoscience will say that, well, truth is all relative. I mean, your truth is different from my truth, and this is what I know, and you don't know what I know, so you can't possibly know the glory of my whatever.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. That's probably the second most common argument in chat rooms that to bolster a pseudo-scientific or a New Age belief. And basically, what I saw is that they tend to confuse perception with reality. You know, when I bring up a question, I'll say, well, you know, isn't there just one objective reality and there's multiple perceptions of it? And they'll say, no. Perception is reality. And, you know, that may be true, possibly, but it's kind of a weird concept. And it tends to get more like the postmodern philosophers who kind of ended up kind of losing any kind of validity in this mishmash of relativism. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example of one of those. One chatter came in one night and was arguing about some particular thing. I don't recall exactly what it was, but when we questioned some of the things he was saying, he says, well, you really can't limit me because I don't believe in definitions. When you define something, you limit it. And I go, oh, okay. So I asked him how he could compose seemingly coherent sentences in a chat room without using commonly agreed upon definitions of words. And I said, you're shooting to making sense. I mean, you know, by the common definitions of words, you're making sense to me, but you're saying you don't believe in definitions. And he kind of had no answer, but, you know, he hadn't really thought of it below a certain level.
That's ridiculous. I mean, every word we utilize,
exactly.
I mean, that's how we communicate.
I think in many cases, these people really haven't thought their arguments through to the logical conclusion. And when you take it to the conclusion, it becomes absurd. And that's the part when they get defensive and they'll just say, well, you're just being close-minded. They leave. There's another one that who adamantly did not believe that any history was correct. She believed that all history was a second-hand biased source, and therefore you couldn't believe a word of it, and that she lived totally in the present, literally.
Well, yes, a common argument I hear, and I'm sure you've heard, is that how do we know that Plato existed?
Yeah, right. And you know, Plato, well, so what? You know, eventually you have to kind of accept some things and accept the evidence for some things without 100% certainty. But if you live totally literally like that, I don't know how you can function.
Well, not to mention there were some people who actually wrote about him while he existed. So,
sure.
Unlike the Jesus mythos, I mean, you know, no one wrote about him while he existed. Right.
And you know, and take Atlantis for example. You mentioned Plato. So that is another popular argument. When we talk about Atlantis, you know, I bring up the fact that Atlantis was a third-hand story that Plato got from Solon, who got his story from some Egyptian priests. And who knows what the basis for the myth was originally. And yet they'll just go on and on and on about how technically advanced these Atlanteans were and blah 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 blah. And I'll ask them, well, what possible evidence do you have for that? I mean, Plato's story was fairly short. He's mentioned in two of his little dialogues, and neither one of them really goes into much detail. Most of it's political and philosophic. And they go, well, you got to take this, and then they grab an Edgar Casey and all the other people, you know. And it's just a matter of, it's just a case of them completely losing any sense of critical thinking or objectivity.
You know, in the African American community, is very, I don't know if this is recent, but I've been hearing a lot of this lately, that many are saying who believe in New Age African Americans and other religions that really have a lot to do with Egypt, so to speak, or the motherland. This is so funny to me. They say that, well, we used to have telekinesis, but not anymore.
Yeah, we forgot it.
I mean, what? And I hear that all the time. And because that's once again, just because we don't know for sure, we have to posit an explanation to make it make sense. So they say that that's how we move those big rocks. Well, you know, that's a common, one of the more popular chat subjects is the pyramids of Egypt. And the age of the Sphinx, or those two ones are probably the most popular Egyptian topics. And you know, you can talk to your blue in the face about the pyramids, and they just won't believe it. There are all kinds of weird legends about those that have come up. One of my favorites is that they say, well, you know,
the pyramids at Giza, which is where the Great Pyramid is.
Mm-hmm.
There's three pyramids that are in a particular arrangement, and they said that this exactly mirrors the angles of the stars in Orion's belt. Okay? Well, if you go out and actually measure the angles of the pyramids at Giza, and you measure the angles of the stars in Orion's belt, you find that they differ by sometimes up to 15 degrees. So much for that legendary Egyptian precision. Secondly, the layout of the pyramids is upside down from the way the stars appear in the sky. So either the Earth was turned upside down, which is another theory that they like to use, but or maybe the lineup of the pyramids of Egypt is something completely different, and has some other reason. Perhaps the geology of the plateau they're built on. Who knows? But there's a lot more. There are a lot more mundane explanations for where they were built, how they were built, who built them, than having to resort to going and flagging down aliens to come help them build it, or using telekinesis.
Well, are there any rational explanations for how these stones could have been moved, or how could they have been so smooth, and how these statues could have been so elegantly done with just primitive tools? Yes,
I'll give you an example. One of the arguments that Eric von Daniken uses in his old book, The Chariots of the Gods, he did a calculation of how many stones that were used to build the Great Pyramid. And he said that it took 100,000 men 20 years to build it. So he figured how long it would take to quarry at the quarry and move and create it in order to have enough of those stones in time to build the pyramid. And his estimate was that one had to be quarried every 20 minutes in order to meet that particular goal. Well, the science show Nova many years ago took on this challenge. They went to Egypt. They went to the Cairo Museum. They took the tools that they know the Egyptians had left behind that they used to quarry stones. They went out on the street and grabbed 2 or 3 guys that were out there on the street, just some guys walking around, brought them to a quarry, and they showed them how the Egyptians, quarried the stones, which is they would chisel a crack and then insert a wooden wedge and then soak the wedge with water. They would then widen the crack in the stone. And so they had them quarry a stone, not polish it or anything, just quarry it with the right size. And they did it in 12 minutes. Guys had never done it before, did it in 12.
The exact same
size, yeah. The tools the Egyptians used, and they beat the estimate that von Daniken used. So really, what you see is these arguments for the pyramids and Egyptian cultures is that you have these guys that just set these stupid limits on human ingenuity. They say that it's impossible for people to be that smart or to be that pious in their religion to want to build a statue or a pyramid or erect an obelisk, that would just, stagger the mind. But they did it, and they could. And to say that they had to get aliens to come help them is just, insulting humans in general.
And I guess if you have 100,000 slaves, it's not really that difficult, I guess. Huh?
Well, even then, they didn't use slaves. That's the funny part.
Oh, really?
They found records that said that they used free Egyptians. They paid them. They know how much they paid them. They fed them. They had 4 different kinds of beer, believe it or not. And yet people just insist that humans couldn't have done this. And let's face it, if God came down and told you, if you believe it existed, he came down and said, look, build me this pyramid, which is what the sun god essentially is doing to these people. They wouldn't be out there using 8-hour days and with unions, and they'd be doing it for the sun god. And so you got to understand that these people were very, very pious. They were very, very ingenious. They were smart as hell, and they built these things. End of story, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, for those of you just coming in, we're having a very, very interesting chat on pseudoscience and the paranormal. And we're with Dave Wisker, who has been a moderator and host in many different chat rooms at AOL and in Sci-Fi Realm, too. We have a link here on the front page, actually the audio show page here.
Oh, great, a shameless plug.
And talk about that for a second while I'm looking at it.
Sure. I just started working on that particular site, and I'm hosting a chat on Saturday evenings from 10 p.m. Eastern to midnight, and in the Black Hole chat room. And it's designed specifically for skeptics to come in. It's an open topic kind of forum. People can bring up topics that involve the skeptical community, involve pseudoscience, creationism, evolution, God, you name it. We'll talk about it and perhaps bring a skeptical perspective to that particular discussion. And everyone's welcome to come. Just starting up pretty recently, so we could probably get some more people.
Sounds great. And I went on ahead and put a link there for them so they can see that on the page there. Okay, let's talk about the age of the Sphinx and some of the mystery surrounding that.
One of my favorites.
Okay.
Probably one of the most popular I would host would be people coming in and talking about beliefs that has been espoused by two guys. One guy named Graham Hancock, and the other guy's name is Robert Bovell. And these two are two writers that have gotten rich on this is my own opinion, of course. They've gotten rich on fleecing the gullible in terms of archaeology in Egypt in particular.
Okay.
Anyway, they argue that the age of the Sphinx is at least 10,000 years older than what we think it is. Which means that the civilization that built it predated the Egyptian civilization and most of the civilization known to man. Now, I challenge anyone to find any physical evidence of this other than the Sphinx, but anyway, their argument goes like this. They have a geologist by the name of, I think his name is Herbert Schock, and what he did, he studied the Sphinx, the weathering on the Sphinx itself. The Sphinx is an outcropping of limestone, and that was carved to resemble this giant mythical monster. And he studied the weathering on the limestone, and he came to the conclusion that it had been weathered by water. It showed evidence of rainwater producing rounded furrows in the actual stone. Okay. And so his conclusion was, since the climate of Egypt was so dry, that the last time that it had any recent rains that were considerable was at least 7,000 to 10,000 years prior to when we think it was built, which was around 4,500 BC. So, 4,500 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so these people will come into the room and they'll say, but this geologist says, that this rock is weathered like this, and no. Well, if you take a step back and get away from the hype, you can actually start reading some actual geology papers. There's a guy, his name is Gauri, Gauri. He's a geologist. I forget what university he works for. But he's been studying the Sphinx and the weathering patterns in the Sphinx for some time. And basically, his explanation is a little more mundane. What he says is that what you're seeing is not an example of water weathering the stone. So what you're seeing is a very common geologic feature known as salt crystal exfoliation. Now, I'll explain what that is. Mm-hmm. Limestone it's a sedimentary rock. It consists of layers of sediment that have been deposited in usually marine environments. And in the case of the Sphinx, the limestone there was deposited at the bottom of a seabed. So as a consequence, there's a lot of salt mixed in with the stone itself. Mm-hmm. Now, in Egypt, at dawn, when just before the sun rises, the dew will gather on the rock itself, on the surface of the rock. And even in the driest periods, you'll have some dew gather on this rock. Mm-hmm. And when that water mixes with salts that are naturally in the stone, what you get is like an acid that eats away the stone and creates the same kind of rounded effect that you would see if it was constantly weathered by streams of water. Hmm. And the nice thing about it is that you can see it happen every day, and it's a common geological feature that most geologists understand and have known for decades. But would Hancock or Bovell ever bring that up? No. Does Schock ever bring it up? No. Why? Because it's a more mundane, simpler explanation for what they say is, proof that this thing is 10,000 years old. I'll give you another example. The Sphinx and the pyramids themselves have been carbon dated. They found, there's a recent article in the magazine Archaeology that talks about mortar found in some of the Great Pyramids of Giza, and that was there. It was mortar mixed with charcoal from the bakeries used to feed the workers.
Mm-hmm.
And the wood in the charcoal can be dated. And guess what? It goes back to about 4,500 years. Which is what, the Fourth Dynasty was right about that point, about 2,500 BC, something like that. Anyway, which is pretty much in line with the mainstream Egyptological consensus on the ages of the pyramids and the Sphinx itself. Now, you can argue about that over and over and say that, well, what do they know? And which is what a lot of the New Agers do. But frankly, I tend to go for the simpler explanation. When you start talking about monuments that are tens of thousands of years older than any known civilization, and there's no other corroborating evidence, well, I tend to go with that.
Wow. Well, that was a lot of information there.
Sorry about that, but that's one of my favorite stories.
I mean, I loved it. I'm sure that our listeners did as well. Wow. Well, New Age. I've heard this term mentioned a lot tonight, and I've used it a few times. But what exactly does that mean? And I mean, what is New Age? What are New Agers? What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's not easy to describe because it's not really a hard core definition. It's a loose cluster of religious beliefs that basically borrow from a lot of different traditions. You'll find a lot of Native American spiritual beliefs incorporated in the New Age pantheon. You'll also find in some of the Wiccans and the pagans, you'll find them claiming to have ties to Druidism, and things like that. So it tends to be it's a mixture of things. I found over the years talking with them that most of them tend to be disgruntled Christians who really didn't like the idea of self-sacrifice and religions that require a little more than just chanting, and went for a salad bar religion that where they could pick out all the fun stuff and leave all the icky stuff behind. But that's just me.
Well, we're talking about Egypt earlier, and what about the face on Mars? Cydonia, and they've even made movies about it.
Yep.
A wonderful movie too, by the way. But once again, just fantasy. What is the hype with this, and what are the truths behind that? If you have any information on that.
Sure. The face on Mars, of course, for those who remember, is a geological feature that was photographed back in the 70s by the Viking lander, and it sent back to Earth, and basically what it looked like was a human face, or a mask, sitting on this desert plain on Mars. And, from that point, there was a lot of speculation grew. One of the things was that this had been carved by an advanced civilization that no longer existed on Mars. It had been carved by an advanced civilization that had left Mars and had come here, and we're descendants of them. I think that they tied in, the main guy that presents this kind of stuff is a guy named Richard Hoagland, who is, hold on, excuse me. Anyway,
what are you talking about, Richard Hoagland?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry, I got distracted.
No, it's okay, I understand.
Going outside. Anyway, he basically said that he's constructed this elaborate mythology around this so-called face. And he used fractal analysis to show that this could not have been weathered by chance. It could not be a geological feature that showed wind or water erosion, things like that.
I've seen those very intricate drawings. Actually, I believe I got a book from Graham Hancock.
Right. Hancock is another one of those people that jumped on the bandwagon.
Very intricate artistry involved in those superimpositions there.
It gets very, very elaborate. Well, at any rate, unfortunately for them, the Mars Global Surveyor was sent over to Mars just recently, and any look at the photographs of the Cydonia region show that it is, without a doubt, just a bunch of rocks that were basically weathered and the effect of the face was merely the effect of light and shadow. So, they won't admit that, of course. They say, well, they'll pull the conspiracy card and say, well, NASA's really covering it up. They won't let us see that. The pictures have been doctored, blah, 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 blah. But, the face on Mars itself is now pretty much debunked.
It's interesting, though. Once again, it shows how structures that seemingly do not have any particular pattern to them can actually create familiar objects.
Very true. I'll give you an example on Earth. There's a place in Utah called Kodachrome Basin, in the Utah desert. And there are some interesting structures there, one of which is a gigantic, almost perfect replica of male genitalia.
Wow.
If you walk up to it, you would swear that it had been carved. But it's not. It's a natural, called a lava tube or something to that effect, I think it's called. And I've seen it. It's pretty amazing. So, if that can happen here with wind and volcanic action, don't tell me that the face on Mars couldn't be a bunch of rocks either.
Interesting. So, well, I guess that would also apply to biological life as well then, huh?
Very true. True.
That's interesting. I wonder well, I remember you sent me an email and you mentioned something about Hale-Bopp.
Oh, Hale-Bopp.
Yeah, I don't even know I know their website is still up. I don't even really know the whole deal with that group of people, but what was that all about?
Well, okay, the Hale-Bopp, of course, is a comet, named after the two astronomers that discovered it. And as it approached Earth and could be seen in the sky, I'm not sure if you actually went out and saw it. I did. It was very impressive. But what started the whole thing was an amateur astronomer by the name of Chuck Shermer, I think his name is, or Schuler. I'm not quite sure his right name anymore. It's been a couple of years since it happened. But anyway, he published a photograph that he said showed a faint, very large UFO companion right behind the comet itself. He claimed that it was the size of Saturn or Jupiter, I think, and had rings, and said that it had to be kind of a UFO. Well, everyone jumped on the bandwagon. I'll give you an example. The remote viewers, the people that did claim that they can actually see, remotely, claimed that they had been on board this UFO companion.
Richard Hoagland.
Yeah, Hoagland, Ed Dames is the one that I think said he was there.
That's right.
And he's one of the more popular ones. He claimed that there was a UFO there, and it had aliens on board, and there was going to be this big, confab when they got here, and one of the things I noticed that one of the people that was in the staff that I worked with at Periscope on AOL, he was a firm believer that this was a true UFO, and so he sent me the photograph that apparently this amateur astronomer had published. And I took a look at it, and I've dabbled in amateur astronomy over the years, and I've seen pictures of stars, and what he was seeing was, and describing as rings around this companion, were really what was known as a diffraction spike. If you look at stars that are very concentrated points of light, when they sometimes photograph through telescopic lenses, they will get look like spikes around them, and it's very common. And when I started investigating that, I talked to a couple of astronomers that around the country, and they were saying, yeah, that's what it is. It's a star. That's all it is. It just happened to be in that particular position when the comet came by. Well, of course, as you understand, that this particular comet and this interpretation of this UFO thing, it got very popular around the country through the Art Bell radio show. He got Richard Hoagland and Ed Dames and even Whitley Strieber, the guy that wrote the book Communion. He got on there and was saying, oh yeah, it had to be a UFO. And the tragedy, of course, is the Heaven's Gate people took that literally.
Yeah, right. That's what I was talking about earlier.
Right,
Yes.
and ended up, believing that the UFO was the mothership to come take them all home, and they went ahead and killed themselves. So, you can see now where some of this lack of critical thinking and gullibility led to some rather tragic results.
Yeah. That really bothered me as well. And I used to be a fan of Art Bell. And the more and more I listen, the more it kicks out a lot of pseudoscience and doesn't have anybody come on to actually challenge what these individuals are talking about, and that can be dangerous, as we have seen. Well,
it's true that the earlier skeptical view is very rarely presented, and
right.
And that's part of the problem too. In some of the cable television channels like the Learning Channel, Discovery Channel, they tend to rest on their laurels as being science shows and educational channels, and yet they'll constantly shows about UFOs and paranormal phenomena that are about as gullible as you can get.
Yeah, they are slipping. I've noticed that, especially the Learning Channel, even more so than Discovery. And I believe the Learning Channel has this guy on there who claims he can talk to the dead.
Oh, John Edwards?
Oh, no, so that's the Sci-Fi Channel, actually. Well, it being on the Sci-Fi Channel alone should let people know, right?
Yeah.
Science fiction.
I guess they know where their bread is buttered. And face it, the paranormal is very popular and generates a lot of money. All you got to do is walk into a Barnes & Noble and look at the New Age section to find out how much money there is and that kind of stuff.
That's true. As a matter of fact, the Learning Channel had a story about the life of Jesus on a couple of nights ago, and I just honestly I didn't watch the whole program. They talked about him, whatever, as if it was a real person. They talked about the people who knew him, his life, and what he did and what he ate. It was just ridiculous. I really couldn't even think. Where were the skeptics involved in this process?
Well, it's sad they don't bring them in because they're a downer. One of the things that people tend to think of, and there's a recent commercial that talks about skeptics and about skeptics being more like cynics. Most people, I think, in their mind equate the term skeptic with cynic.
Yes, they do.
But in reality, the opposite is true. And they think of us skeptics as a bunch of old curmudgeons and they're trying to spoil the fun, Well, sorry, but, I just don't buy into that particular kind of line of reasoning. If you want to believe in that, that's fine with me, but if you're going to come into a chat room and try and defend your views, you better have your facts straight, and most of them don't. Some do. I mean, some are very good, and I've met a few people that are very, very knowledgeable in their field, but they often will fall on the argument that, well, we don't know for sure, so therefore I have to be right.
Well, we're with Dave Wisker. If you just come in, we were talking about pseudoscience and fallacies presented by New Agers and others who want to believe these things, such as pyramids in Egypt built by aliens and psychic abilities and things of this nature. Quantum mysticism, Dave.
Yeah, that's one that has come up fairly recently. It's a pretty common term. You can find it by reading books by Deepak Chopra. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yes.
He tends to equate the recent discoveries in quantum mechanics, which is a very obscure branch of physics. Well, obscure, it's actually quite robust now, but they try and take quantum mechanics and apply it to mysticism and justify their beliefs because of what quantum mechanics says. And now I'm no physicist. I don't pretend to be. I do know a little bit about it, and what I have read doesn't say anything about God or the mind or consciousness or anything else, because these people will tend to take this concept of quantum phenomena and try and extrapolate it to consciousness and to universal consciousness and God and you name it. If it don't say quantum in front of it, and they'll run away and go crazy. Now, I'll plug another book here while I'm at it.
Okay.
For those of you who are tired of the quantum mystics and would like a very good debunking of that whole concept, there's a book out by a physicist from the University of Hawaii. His name is Victor Stenger. It's Stenger. And the book is called The Unconscious Quantum. Now, it's called Metaphysics in Modern Physics and Cosmology. And it's an excellent, excellent book, because what he does takes that idea, the quantum mystics, and basically says, look, I can come up with equally or far more plausible and simpler explanations for the quantum phenomenon than you guys. And because I can do that, why should we believe this mysticism stuff? Mm-hmm. He also illustrates some of the misinterpretations of some of the famous physicists that these mystics like to quote all the time. One of them being David Bohm, another John Wheeler. He shows how they've been misinterpreted, misunderstood, misappropriated, and everything else. So it's very hard to talk about on a interview kind of thing. But I do recommend that book highly, because it's probably the best refutation of the quantum mystics phenomenon, and you'll probably hear more and more of it as the years go on, because quantum is a very popular word now.
And that's very interesting. That's very similar to the debate going on between creationists and evolutionists when they talk about how the first and second laws of thermodynamics actually proves God's existence.
That's true. Those are my favorites. The creationists are my favorites, because they really there's a group of them that I kind of admire. Okay, I admire them because they really are honest in their beliefs. Okay, they sincerely believe that God did it in 6 days, and He rested on the seventh. They were 24-hour days. By gum, and if science contradicts that view, then science has to be wrong. And they'll say, we're sorry. That's the only way we can look at it. Those people I can kind of respect, because they basically, put a stake in the ground and will admit to, having that bias. But the ones that I cannot stand are the ones that try and tear down evolution using false science or pseudo-science, and expect everyone to then automatically assume that creationism is right by default. And those are the ones that once they're in the schools, they want to have creationism taught on equal basis with evolution in science classes. Because
evolution is just a theory.
It's just a theory. It's not proven. We didn't see it. So blah 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 blah. And yet, if you sit down and talk to them and say, well, what do you understand about evolution? What you usually find is that they don't know anything about it. They know what is basically a straw man caricature of the theory. And that's what they use to try and tear it down.
I know what I hear a lot from individuals who do not know about evolution. They will say, well, I just can't believe that, that we came from gorillas. Automatically, you're dealing with someone. If anyone approaches you and says that they do not believe, and this is for the listeners, who comes to you and says that they don't believe that they came from monkeys or gorillas, they have no idea what evolution is about.
Yeah, well, I usually say, well, I agree with you. You're right. We didn't come from monkeys, right? They did.
Good one.
They really don't understand even the basics. And I'll be honest, it's not evolution is not a theory that is very easily demonstrated. Okay, there's a lot of evidence to support it, but it comes from a lot of different disciplines. You have paleontology, you've got molecular biology, you've got genetics,
geology.
All of them are lines of evidence supporting the theory that put together make an overwhelming case. It's very hard to when debating a creationist, for example, to have that or to present that in a very easily, simply digested form. Whereas the creationist has the advantage in the debates because they can use any caricature they want, and they can throw stuff out that you would never know, and they tend to do that. It's basically an intellectually dishonest approach to debating, but what can I say?
Yeah, I know that they'll attack one particular point.
Oh, sure, and they'll even lie about it. I mean, an example, one of the best creation debaters around is a guy by the name of Dwayne Gish. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yes.
He does have a little bit of credibility because he's got a PhD in biochemistry from Berkeley, and my alma mater. I hate that. Just the thought of that. But anyway, I'm going on. He once had an argument about this particular beetle called the bombardier beetle.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that this particular beetle, because it has a defense mechanism, it mixes two chemicals together in a special chamber in its abdomen, and then it squeezes out this a mixture. And when it hits the air, it burns. It's kind of a burning, irritating kind of compound. And he said that the reason that it couldn't have evolved from gradual steps was because when you mix those two chemicals together, they explode. So how did it ever happen in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you talk to anyone that's familiar with bombardier beetles, they will carefully explain to you that you can take those two particular compounds, mix them, and they don't explode. But Gish, who as a biochemist, should have known that and did know that, but went ahead and spread the lie anyway. And he's been corrected many times before, and I think only recently has he stopped using that particular example. Because the reason they use all these examples and lie is because people don't know they're being conned. And, I had a great quote here from William Bennett, I think he used to be the Secretary of Education or head of the Education Department under one of the presidents. But he said, in all of these efforts to promote creationism in schools, the creationists make abundant use of a simple tactic. They lie. They lie continually, they lie prodigiously, and they lie because they must.
Oh, and the Bible says that's okay too, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's okay to lie. I've heard creationists say it's fine to lie.
As long as you're supporting Jesus Christ, and
or if you're using it for a certain purpose, for a religious purpose, yeah.
Well, of course, right? They use the analogy of how wouldn't you lie to protect your family from
Oh yeah, yes, you know it, and I know it, and they know it, but it's the only way they can get anywhere is by lying. A good example is the Kansas State Board of Education. Those people that got in there and got elected, they didn't get elected because they were creationists. They didn't tell anybody about that. And they got in, and then they said, okay, now we can change the curriculum the way we want. And what they found, though, was that the people of Kansas were a little smarter than they thought and didn't like the idea that they'd been conned and voted them out again. So,
well, it's interesting. You talk about lying, and I can say with confidence, and I will definitely not even recall what I'm going to say here. But earlier we were talking about, what's this guy? Kent Hovind.
With what?
Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind.
Oh, Kent Hovind.
Right.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Kent Hovind, not too recently, had a debate with Massimo Pigliucci.
Okay.
And he pulled out a slide of him standing next to this giant femur. And claimed that it was evidence he claims that he saw this bone and he took a picture next to this bone and all of these things, and that is evidence that there were giants back in those days, like the Bible talks about. Well, my wife, as intelligent and keen as she is, noticed a little disclaimer on the slide.
Oh, yeah?
That stated that was only a copy of a bone found. And when I spoke with other people concerning that, they said, no, that was a mammoth bone. Now, and I'm thinking, oh, man, I mean, whew. And it's been known that small mammoths do have some bones similar to ours. So when I saw that, and it really, really upset me. And you're right, they will. I really try to give them benefit of the doubt. Maybe they really just don't know. But even on his own slide, it said this is a copy. But he told the audience that he was there and he saw the bone.
Yeah.
But here he is holding up a large femur of another mammal, and it's actually a copy, plastered copy of it's just ridiculous.
Oh yeah, and Hovind is a particularly a good example of that. Gish is another one. Paul Bauer is another one too, or Baal, I guess his name is. The one that talked about the human the footprints found in the Palatsi.
The Palatsi footprints, yes.
Now they'll do anything to try and get their point of view across, and they don't care how they do it, because they're looking at it as basically as lying for Jesus. And I don't know, I just don't buy that, but a lot of people do, and it's sad to think that there are people in this country who were sent to public schools who really don't understand even the basics about evolution, and yet and will buy arguments by these guys because they're slick snake oil salesmen, all of them. And I try, at least in my chats, to try and bring the other side a little bit. And if they do come in there trying to do the creationist shtick, I try at least to nail them to the wall and try and get the science out of them first.
That's great.
It doesn't take long, though. They don't have much.
Well, we're almost at the top of the hour now. We're going to do a question and answer here. And for any of you listening to the show right now, if you go to the audio show page and click on chat, enter the chat room, and you can ask our guest some questions if you would like. We have a question from Bain. He's asking, I'm not quite sure of the pronunciation here, but is Chompra the one who pointed out the parallels in quantum mechanics and Indra's net and the Buddhist concept of nature of the nature of matter?
Yeah, as best I understand Deepak Chopra's stuff, yes. He also talks about quantum mechanics and its ties to Buddhist and various other faiths as well, and Hindu faiths as well. The question I think that people should be asking Mr. Chopra, who, by the way, is a great talk show guest. I saw him on Politically Incorrect one time, and he was hilarious. He's very, very good. But as far as his quantum mechanics concepts, they're very fuzzy. And basically what he's trying to do is he's trying to take what happens at the quantum level, which is the subatomic particle level, and he's trying to extrapolate those effects, which are called non-local effects, where something can be in two places at once. Okay. Which is what seems to be happening at the quantum level. It's not quite true, but it looks that way. They try to extrapolate that to the area of the macro level, like you and me, in terms of, and they try and say that they're equally valid at both levels of experience. And that's not quite true. You really can't do that. I'll give you an analogy. Okay. We can take Newton's physics and mechanics, and we can very precisely predict the orbits of planets. We can send probes to Jupiter, with an amazing sense of accuracy, using those simple mechanical physics that Newton developed so long ago. Yet, when we go to another level, that is at high relativistic speeds, where we approach a significant percentage of the speed of light, those rules fall apart. They don't apply anymore because we now have a different frame of reference from which to evaluate reality. And we have to use relativistic mechanics to explain that. And this means that Newton's stuff is, if we throw it out, is perfectly valid at that level, but it's not at the high speeds that the relativistic mechanics works with. The same thing with quantum mechanics. You can't, it works greater at a certain level, and it has certain kinds of effects that appear to be non-local and have a tie to consciousness, but they do not apply to the level above a molecule, for say, or an organism. So I guess that's the way I can answer that question. Okay. Well, we're now at the top of the hour. This is the conclusion of the show. If our listeners want to contact you, how would they go about doing that? What's your email address? And also talk about any upcoming chats that you may be involved in or consistently at, once again. Sure. They can come by my chat, which the link will show. They can also send me an email at the Sci-Fi Realm area. My email address there is sci-fi helix, one word, at rangerprod.com. At rangerprod.com. Yeah. Okay. And it's an email there, and I'll be glad to answer any questions or point them to some resources that I've come across, maybe share some chat stories, whatever. I'd be glad to do it. That'd be great. Well, it was great having you on the show, and I really learned a lot. I have a lot of questions here, and great. Maybe you can work part-time for the answer guy at SciCop. Well, I appreciate you having me on. No problem. I'll put you on hold for a second, and I'll sign off. Okay. Well, everyone, thanks to you once again for stopping by the
new live audio show. And if you have any questions, once again, stay around for the chat. Helix will be, as a matter of fact, if you see Helix in the chat room, that is our guest. That is Dave Wisker. You can ask him some more questions if you would like. Remember, if you have any guests that you can think of that you would like to appear on the new live audio show, please do so. You can contact me at infidelguy@aol.com. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, and I hope you all have a nice evening. Thank you very much.
And for those who decided to hang out toward the end, hi, this is Dr. Finley, formerly the Infidel Guy, or I guess once an Infidel Guy, always an Infidel Guy. That was Dave Wisker. Thank you for listening to that. Again, the audio, I apologize for the audio quality. It's been a while. We're trying our best to fix it up, but yeah, as you can see, it's a struggle. Thankfully, as shows continue, they get better. But anyway, an update about Dave. Well, Dave Wisker, I was looking through my Facebook because I reached out to him and asked him, do you want to give any final thoughts? Like, give us an update. Like, where are you now? What's happening now? What's different in your life? What's going on? What are your views now? And I noticed that we last had a conversation around February 2017. Well, I also noticed that his post stopped shortly after that. And I thought that was odd. Well, unfortunately, I later discovered when I visited his wife's page and discovered that he actually did die about 4 months after that conversation with me. And I feel horrible not knowing this. But anyway, but Dave left a lasting legacy, in me. He had me really start thinking more about understanding logical fallacies, how people confuse theories with hypotheses and laws, and what is actual evidence, empirical evidence, how science actually works. He kind of reinforced these ideas in my head and gave me some clearer, perspectives on it as well. And as a professor of scientific literacy, when I'm teaching my course, that is one of the basic things I talk about with my students first. And really, even all my classes that are scientifically based, I make sure they understand this difference between, what you believe, right? What you think, what constitutes as evidence, what constitutes as scientific evidence, what's a theory, what's a law, what's a hypothesis. And we talk and go over all these things so that it is very clear in their mind that when we talk about certain things, where are you really in that landscape of scientific exploration or the scientific process? Like, where are you really? Is it something you just believe to be true, or is it something that you have some evidence to show that is true? Is it testable? And I think it's so important, right, when he brought up hypothesis, that I'm always reminding my students, if you state that you have a hypothesis, or that there is a hypothesis here about something, then it is a positive claim, generally, about something, right? You're making a claim about something that you think is true. But you have to be able to set up an experiment in some kind of way, or devise some method in which we can show that it is not the case, that that's true. If you cannot set up any kind of method to show that a hypothesis is not true, then that's just not science. And that means I'm not going to say I don't have to necessarily entertain your beliefs or your ideas, but they're not going to have a lot of weight with me. It kind of reminds me of a paper that I wrote recently that got rejected because of that same kind of thing. And they just wanted to see more practical applications of this idea I had, rather than just making claims. I mean, even though I had evidence backing up what I said with other researchers, they really would prefer to see me do something more experimental. So I kind of revising some of my research and talking to schools and educators, trying to figure out how can I get some data that can back up more of what I'm talking about. And if it's not true, that will show up in the data, right? Period. But that's how it's supposed to be. So, Margaret, if you're listening, my belated condolences, and to all those who knew him personally, yeah, he was an awesome guy. And again, he's left a mark on me positively, and now I'm able to kind of give that to others as well, helping them think more critically and skeptically. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you with the next upload. Bye-bye.